Spring 1920. So who would take Milo father's money? Into which relative's care would Milo's life be put? Thomas did not know, but the thought had been simmering in the back of his mind for the best part of 6 months. Though Milo did not seem to notice, her father's condition had definitely worsened, and several of Thomas's plans would not come off. If an unknown distant relation were to take control of the money, Milo would be left with and take a good creamy slice off the top of it for themselves. No doubt. Shortly after Christmas, Thomas has received word that a cousin of his who worked in the judiciary office at York was safe back from the war. On a half-day moved to a weekday, Thomas travelled by train to meet Fred Bonner, who told him that, should a child be left without a guardian, a search would be conducted for one. And how long would that take? Thomas had asked, bringing out a cigarette and striking up a match. I don't know, his cousin sniffed, placing his hand around 2 lamb joints Thomas had purloined from Downton's pantry. If there is no obvious family member who can take legal responsibility for her. Fred shook his head when Thomas offered him a cigarette. Unless she marries, of course. But would she not need a guardian's approval? She's only 16. Why? Fred narrowed his eyes, as if knowingly. You thinking of it, you sly devil? Number. Thomas replied, coldly. She is the sister of a man who was once my friend. Thomas told him he died at the front, 3 weeks before armistice. I feel some affection responsibility for her. Her father is dying. She is somewhat vulnerable. A friend. Fred's voice took on a knowing tone. Like Albert Cook. No, not like Albert Cook, Thomas corrected him. Like. His voice trailed off. He could not admit it. Not at all. But Ernest's face came to him, at night, in the early morning. At times when he just let his mind free for a moment. All the life, the joy, the exhilaration of Ernest. All their love. If this girl, aged 16, were to marry in Scotland, there would be no need for any permission from any guardian, Fred told him, bringing Thomas out of his sad place. The law is remarkably different in many respects north of the border. Thomas brightened, for he had suspected something for a long time, something which added up so neatly and would cause such misery were it to be true that he suspected that it could only be the true. And he, Thomas, would have to help circumvent it if Milo was to at least be alone, at least be able to determine her own life without him taking her decisions from her. No matter what you say, she is more to you than a lover's sister, Fred hypothesized. Thomas sniffed, picking up a pamphlet from his cousin's desk. Communism. Are we under threat? I don't rightly know what we are to one another, Thomas admitted. She has no one, and she is as brilliant as her brother. I don't like to see someone that different be the victim of exploitation. Fred said nothing more, just nodded. She was different, as was he, and all this had given Thomas something to think about, and he began to make his own enquiries into Milo's family. 88,888,888. So Milo had been welcomed to do her work, although a lot of it did not involve her to be at Downton, more at the church, of whom permission Milo had had to seek from the vicar. It was Lord Grantham who had to persuade him, and he had reluctantly agreed, telling Milo that he needed to be acknowledged when she had finished her broider's work. As well as electrical signals, Milo had gowned that she could collect the telephone signals, especially when people made calls to the operator. It fascinated her that her short radio relay worked so well that she could do this, but had little or no interest in what was being said, until an urgent voice came over the radio receiver one night, just after Easter, in a language which was not Milo's own. Yet, she understood it, and listened carefully as she translated everything in her head. So, he was about to return, was he? He had been rumbled. His number was up. He was involved enough that he could be hanged. It was terrible that he had tried it on his own family before he and others had attacked more. It was this sad thought that had made her come to Thomas's attention, and she told him what she had heard. I learned the Irish language when I stayed with the O'Brien family. The Lord in Chicken, Milo clarified. I understood all that was said. And you are sure? Unless there was more context, she told him. More conversation I did not hear. Milo, this is serious. It is a treacherous attack on our country by people wanting to arm themselves and bring terror. You should write down all you hear, bring it to me, and I will pass it on to his lordship, and the police." And Milo nodded, and she did. And Thomas Barrow collected a good deal of information about Lord Grantham's son-in-law and his nefarious activities in Dublin. 88,888,888. It was April, just after Easter, when even Milo, as a deluge fell on her head, told herself that she should come down from St. Michael's Tower. But she had been up long enough to hear more messages, spoken frantically between two men. The police knew of what they had done. He should run to save himself. Should his wife go with him, he would be surely caught. And she pieced it together, an heir to a noble estate that he did not want, rebel to a cause he didn't believe in, and all for the sake of proving he was more of a son to the woman who gave birth to him, and the family that raised him than the Inchiquin family, whose home he had now razed to the ground with other armed Republicans. He was coming to Downton. She needed to tell them, but it meant a mile walk to the big house. Pulling on her brother's galoshes and Sue Wester, Milo began the walk. Whom should she tell? The Dowager? Lord Grantham? What was she to say? She got to the courtyard at the back of the house, and spied the garage. The chauffeur was not in his cottage. No lights appeared in the window. Milo opened the doors. Both a terrorist and a member of the Crawley family. It would be Lord Grantham who had to decide that. But she could at least help him to Downton. She had seen Taylor many a time crank the engine, and so did Milo, turning around the handle at the front of the car until it juddered into life. And she got into it, legs long enough to reach the pedals, her lights, much brighter than the ones supplied by Daimler, glowing into the blackest of the night. She found Tom Branson trudging through the lane at the other end of Downton, where a train huffed mightily away from the station on its way to York. Milo's childish idea that steam engines were dragons, shooting along their rails, tamed yet furious, filled her mind as he pushed her foot onto the brake, but balanced the engine, throbbing like a heartbeat. "Milo!" Tom exclaimed, and he took the wheel as Milo got out. She turned to go, for she was half a mile from home, but Tom would not hear of her walking. "Say nothing to me," Milo told him. She felt cross, and had the words in her mind to say so. Even though he was troubled, it did not give Branson the right to destroy people's property, kill them, even. "I will thank you," Tom Branson told her. "You know of my family, somehow, and yet you chose to help me." "Mr. Branson," Milo told him, coldly, but then turned to look out at the rain, dashing as it was against the car windscreen. The words were tangled, like a badly constructed cat's cradle. "I will say nothing about how you are aristocracy. What do you know about it?" Branson shot back. "They turned the corner at the cross in the center of Downton. You are a revolutionary. You planned it, but so did many. You are the heir to the title of Inchiquin of Drome, and they are your family. You are not carrying out a socialist revolution but a nationalist one." Branson braked the car and turned to her, furiously, grabbing Milo's shoulder. "You have done me bad turn after bad turn, like a she from the fairy stories," he cried. "And you are causing unhappiness wherever you go." Bronwyn did not want to Dublin, and yet the lies of her brother made her do so. Milo had heard the story, many stories, so ancient the author could not be told, and this one, of the princess who did not wish to leave Anglesey but trusted her kin to her doom, was one of them. "If you tell them, you will find yourself dead," Tom Branson told her, then thrust her away from him like a foul drag. "Go, get out of here. If I see you at Downton again, I will kill you." Heart beating, as the rain hammered onto her rubber coat, Milo watched Tom Branson force the car back round in the direction of Downton. "Then why am I still upright and breathing?" "The dead don't breathe," she called back to him. Branson looked over his shoulder and called back, his face forming a hideous grin. "And they don't talk, either."